This is Dune Talk, a DuneNewsNet.com production. Join us now for the latest Dune news, reactions, and lively discussions.
Hey there, and welcome. It's time for this week's Dune Talk. You're watching or listening to the official show of DuneNewsNet.com, where the news must flow. Books, movies, TV shows. If it's Dune, it's here. There's some important news and rumors to cover. Today, we're talking about both the big screen and small screen productions. This is Marcus Gabriel, your editor at DuneNewsNet.com, and I'm joined by Johnny and Simon.
Hey everyone, this is Johnny Sobczak here. Thank you for joining the show once again. Not a ton of news this week, but important news for us to discuss. So I'm excited to get our perspectives and keep the buzz going for as long as we can go here. Let's see what happens.
Hey, Simon here. Like they said, some big news, not major news, but kind of major news, mostly rumors. But let's hope they're not true because I don't want to wait.
Dune Movie News.
So we're coming off a breathtaking second trailer for Dune Part 2. And if you haven't already, do check out our last two episodes with reactions and a shot-by-shot breakdown. This month, there have been more developments surrounding the movie, and to be honest, some of them are concerning. On July 14th, the Screen Actors Guild, the labor union that represents over 160,000 actors in performance, they went on strike and started picket lines in Los Angeles and New York. Just a week later, Variety published a report that Warner Brothers is considering pushing back Dune Part 2 from this November into 2024. They're likewise reviewing dates for other 2023 releases, including Aquaman and The Lost Kingdom. So this report is citing sources with knowledge of the situation. However, it's important to note that these are only discussions. As of now, the movie is still scheduled to premiere on November 3rd. Any potential decision to change that release would have to be signed off by Legendary Entertainment. Before we get into the Dune-specific impact, let's take a step back. This is the second major work stoppage currently affecting Hollywood productions, as the Writers Guild of America also began their strike earlier this year. Johnny, looking at a bird's eye view, why are these two strikes so significant for the industry, and how do they affect movie releases for the coming year?
I mean, this is a huge kind of, watershed moment for the industry, for the United States, for the world in a lot of ways in terms of labor movements. And these two strikes are, of course, getting a lot of the headlines just because they are ongoing and they do affect our movies and our television shows and the things that people are consuming on a daily basis. The Writers Guild strike has been going on since the first week of May. I was actually in LA when it started. We'll have to see how that pans out. Obviously, the Screen Actors Guild, their strike has just recently started, more recently than the writers this month. And it's great to see because it is solidarity essentially between these two huge unions, and they are able to kind of, support one another at the same time. No writing is going on. No deals for writers are being made. No new episodes of television being written. No new films being written. So, anything that was in development that didn't get in front of the camera yet, that is shut down. And it's pretty much undetermined if something hasn't been finished, being written, when that would start again. Fortunately, obviously, in the case of Dune, that's not an issue. The movie was written and filmed, and all that a long time ago, why this is more of an issue for Dune is that it's a star-studded cast. It's a very expensive movie. And with, high profile actors like Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya and the like, actors are a big part of promoting films these days, especially in the era of social media. Last week, the story came out, not just Dune Part 2, but a number of high-profile films, especially Warner Brother films, were apparently in the mix to potentially be delayed. Not a lot of specifics in terms of what that could look like. At that point, it was basically saying, well, this could happen. Well, that's not really news. We know that could happen, and we know that the studios are going to put that out there so that, there's pressure on these folks. So I really don't care at this point when the movie comes out, to be completely honest with you. I would rather this movie get delayed 6 months than have the actors get a deal that isn't up to where it should be, because that deal is something that's going to affect the industry for literally decades moving forward. as movie fans, consumers, someone who isn't in the guild or in the industry, like I'm fine waiting. It's just a movie. Like we can watch other movies and shows in the meantime. But if it does get delayed, and we did get more information today at the time of this recording, there are potential spots where Dune Part 2 could go. Now, I was of the mind that, okay, well, they could delay it potentially, a few weeks, a month, to the holiday season, Christmas, New Year's. I don't think that would necessarily happen. It doesn't say, here one way or another if that could happen. It does list in this Deadline Hollywood article 3 particular slots that it could take. Ultimately, Legendary, and Marcus, I think you alluded to this, Legendary does get the final say. And they do have, they're kind of what they said as in the driver's seat in this situation, because it's their movie. Warner Brothers helps them produce it and they distribute it, but it's really up to them about what happens financially. So apparently they're going to give it until September, Labor Day weekend for the folks in the US. That is when the next phase, or right around the next time the next marketing is supposed to get started. So we'll see what happens between now and then. There could be a deal. There probably won't be. Let's be real. It could be delayed to March. Legendary and Warner Brothers have a date in March that for the next Godzilla versus Kong movie to come out. That is going to be March 15th. I suspect that movie would be delayed to make room for Dune. And that would be a fine release date. That's the date. March has gotten busier and busier in the last few years. So I think that it would perform well potentially if it went there. It would have kind of the Easter holiday weekend not too far behind. And there are all these other movies, for example, I'm looking at March right now. Spider-Man Beyond the Spider-Verse is supposed to come out like 2 weeks after Dune, if it were to go to that date. That movie's not coming out in March. Like that movie is like still being written and like developed. Same thing could be said if it gets pushed to, let's say, June, for example, which is one of the other dates that they mentioned, June 21st, because that weekend right now is empty. I saw someone on Twitter say, well, if it comes out June 21st, the next Mission Impossible movie comes out June 28th. That movie's still being written. They haven't even finished the script for that. They still have to film the movie with the actors that are currently on strike. So some of these other movies, the benefit to Dune is that a lot of them are going to get delayed, especially for next year, the ones that are actually still filming potentially. So that's to Dune's benefit. And so I think whether it goes to March, whether it goes to April, whether it gets a Cannes premiere, maybe it goes to a festival rather than Venice with part 1, it goes to France with part 2. And then it gets, and that's in May is when the Cannes festival is. So we'd have that. And then, potentially June release date. So there's a lot of possibilities. I'm excited by all of them. I think all these would give Dune a potentially even better chance at box office success if it gets delayed versus even where it is now, which I think is still a great date.
Yeah, so basically boiling it down for Dune Part 2, right now the cast can't be involved in the movie's promotion. So the policy includes no interviews, no social media campaigns, no red carpet appearances at film festival or other events. So in short, if this turns out to be a protracted strike, like say even lasting into the fall, Legendary and Warner Brothers have basically the two options that you were mentioning, Johnny. So either they keep the current release date and they proceed with marketing without actors' involvement, or delay the premiere into one of those options. So Simon, what do you believe would be best for the success of the movie? Can you imagine like a scenario where Timothée Chalamet, Zendaya, Florence Pugh, Austin Butler are not participating in promotion?
I just want to see actors and actresses get their promotion, because it is so crucial. Because let's say you're not familiar with Dune, but you're a fan of Florence Pugh because you just saw Oppenheimer, right? Now you're interested in what she has next. You can obviously see it on IMDb. You can see it everywhere. But if you're not if they can't promote it, it's going to hurt business. And also, these people work hard for their projects, for everything that they do. So it's respect for them to let them promote their films. I don't want them to not be able to release on time. In a perfect world, I would love to see it in November, but if I have to wait till June, then so be it. It'll be hot. It'll be summertime. It'll be like on Arrakis. But like Mark Maron was saying, he can't have any actors or actresses that were doing interviews past a certain date that were recorded after, because they can't promote their films, they can't promote anything. It's a really interesting time, and people, there's a lot of stuff that you can catch up on, but support the Actors Guild and support the Writers Guild, because these people work hard, and Dune is pretty much in the can already. They might need to fix some visual effects, some tweaking here and there, but it's been shot. Worst case scenario, they may have to do some reshots, and that's it.
They stuck with November and the strike was still ongoing, which I don't think would happen. But if it did, how much would it really affect the movie? Like how much would the film's performance be affected by that? They've already done not a ton of promotion, obviously, because they're not in the heat of the movie's release, of course, which involves a lot more, promotional material. But we have had 2 really high profile, successful, well-received trailers so far, which were promoted by the cast members on their social media, in interviews, things like that. They've commented on the movie. So, people are aware of Dune, obviously. They've seen the first movie, it's on streaming, people buy it, they've, seen the first one in theaters. So I still think it would do well, but obviously it would not do as well if it, without the support of the cast. So it is the general audience, that and has to show up and support the movie. And I just saw people complaining about, well, Oppenheimer didn't even have much marketing or promotion. Like they, where's the promotion for Oppenheimer? Because there's all this Barbie marketing. And of course, they have big name actors in that movie. It's a huge cast: Robert Downey Jr., Cillian Murphy. But Cillian Murphy's not on social media. You know what I mean? He's not out there. He's in every scene of that movie. And he's a well-known actor. He's a popular actor, but he's not on there, promoting social media. He's in some interviews, but he's not, doing these big gimmicks on the red carpet and whatnot. So I am curious. That movie overperformed almost double what people thought it was going to do opening, weekend. So again, it's such an interesting, scenario. And obviously it's terrible. I wish we weren't in this position, but just kind of watch this space. We'll have to see what happens. I mean, either way, you just got to make peace with it and just prepare for the worst, but hope for the best.
And it's worth noting that the strikes have already negatively impacted the movie's promotion, because for the first time ever, possibly, Dune was scheduled to have a Hall H panel at San Diego Comic-Con on Saturday, July 22nd. The contents weren't officially announced, but the trades confirmed that it would have featured a surprise first look at the movie and appearances by Zendaya and Timothée Chalamet. Simon, what are your thoughts hearing that? I know that you've been to Comic-Con a lot of times in the past.
When I first heard that there was no panel, I was like, oh no, that's a bad sign. And then I saw a bunch of other studios pull out. Honestly, I don't feel like any big news came out of Comic-Con this year, but that's a whole different subject. And then the other things that kind of surprised me, there was no extra promotion for Dune. There was no toys like we thought with the McFarlane figures. So maybe McFarlane Figures knows there's something we don't know yet. Maybe they know it's getting delayed, but I was imagining maybe even the Funko booth showing some pops or nothing. But all there was a Secret of Dune Part 2 art book. I mean, I'm excited about that, but there was no Dune presence. I think there was a couple costumes here and there. And, it's funny because there's so many curses with Dune and every production and the first part we had COVID. The 84 movie just has a whole story. The Jovanovski movie has legendary stories as well. But it's interesting. The legacy of the Dune curse keeps going on. And maybe that's something we should bring Mark from Dune Info on one day and just talk about it, because it's kind of like the Superman curse, that there's always something going on with Dune.
Yeah, and Simon, what you're saying, I do think it's just looking at the Villeneuve's Dune movies, I think it really is a shame to see how both of them, they had really smooth productions. We've had cast and crew have come out and say, how they had a blast filming it, and it was really professional, that they had great relationships on the set with each other, and that's always good to hear in this time. But then when it comes to the release, both of these movies had to face all these headwinds at that time. Yeah, I mean, it's really unfortunate. I feel Dune deserves better than that. But
my gosh,
yeah,
it is like hard to like wrap my brain around the fact that these two movies now have had to go through these like not like once in like a century event basically with the pandemic, and then you have the Screen Actors and the Writers Guild, which is a once in a half a century or more, situation. It's just so bizarre. I mean, the fortunate, I guess, thing about it is that it's not just Dune that's being affected by this. I mean, it's the entire industry, from the pandemic to the HBO Max debacle. So it's a lot of yeah, it's a lot of craziness, and I just feel bad for like Villeneuve because he's the one who's the movie is on his shoulders, and he's the one kind of has to deal with it all. So
let's not forget also, like we brought this up a million times. Sure, part one came out in like the height of COVID, and it still made a ton of money for Legendary / Warner Brothers. People know what Dune is now. The average person pretty much knows of it or has seen it. So imagine if like we never had COVID, how much of a household name Dune would be. It would be that blockbuster that would be the new Star Wars that people would talk about. Or maybe it's just us three. But I mean, honestly, I just feel so bad for Denis because this has been a dream project since he was like, what, 12 or something like that? So it's just like, I finally made it. Oh, it's getting delayed. What's cool, part 2 is going to be even more epic. Oh, it might be delayed again. But honestly, support your actors, support your writers and directors guild. It's so crucial because you don't want AI to take over.
And so we talked about earlier what would be the potential dates where Dune Part 2 could potentially move to. So Johnny, you listed those out. So March, April, June. So like looking at like a change from November to that time of year, how would that like affect the movie's perspectives for an award season campaign?
To be honest with you, not that much, in my opinion. People may disagree with me on that point, but I feel like the time of year ultimately has become less and less of a factor in my view, just from years ago, decades ago now. Like there used to be this kind of very systematic way that studios would go about it, but because the industry has changed so much, the big studios and these smaller studios coming up like A24 and Neon and the streamers, like it's just a completely different world. So I mean, you look at something not that long ago like Mad Max Fury Road, that had a Cannes Festival premiere in May. It had a successful box office run, and then it went on and won like 6 Oscars, and that was almost a year after the movie came out. So I don't think the time of year matters as much. And even more recently, this is kind of a different type of movie, of course, but Everything Everywhere All at Once, I mean, had one of the most unbelievable Oscar sweeps ever, and it came out. It had a festival run in like April, and then it came out in theaters in like June, July, and then it was at the Oscars in like March, the following year. So almost a full year again from release. So I don't think that is something I have concerns about. I think if the movie is good enough, it's going to have an impact, and it's going to last through the entire year, and it's going to be there at the end of the year when people are awarding movies and nominating movies. And I think I'm not as concerned about that. I think the financial element of it is much more important than the awards element of it as well. I think that's really the key. And if November is not as good, depending on the strike and everything, as a March or April, once the strike is hopefully resolved and all that has gone forward, then I'm all for that. Because if it's the difference between getting a third movie potentially and not, then we don't want to play those odds. I don't think so. I'm not worried about that, but I understand some people being, it's a little bit of a bummer. Obviously, you're thinking, oh yeah, it's going to come out right before people are awarding movies, so people are going to be thinking about it and talking about it, which is very exciting, of course. But Oscar-winning movies premiere every single year at Cannes, and even if Dune didn't go to Cannes, it would still be coming out in that April, May, June window. So it's still the same amount of time waiting, and the promotional cycle is kind of similar.
One thing that could help in the long run, let's say it does come out in April, March, whatever, right? Is by the time Oscar season for, I guess, 2024 will be out, the home release will be out, and people will start talking about it again. And that might get the Academy's ear buzzing again and being like, oh, let me take a look back at Dune. Let me look at the cinematography by Greg Fraser, or the editing by Joe Walker, or Denise, directing. So I agree with Johnny. Before, it was such a big deal to have those movies during the holiday, the Christmas rush, early January. But now I feel like I didn't even think about that. Everything and All at Once came out so early last year, and then almost a year later gets nominated for Best Picture. Top Gun Maverick was a summer movie, and that had a bunch of nominations as well. So I think the home release coming out earlier may help in the long run with movies now, just so people remember them. And the Academy gets tons of screeners. It doesn't matter if the movie comes out in November or January 1st of that year. It's also the studio and how much they're going to push it, and their, actors, agents. There's a whole behind the scenes world.
I guess at the end of the day, if they do have to take a decision, either decision is not going to be ideal. So as we were mentioning, like hopefully they don't have to take that decision, that there is some sort of resolution before that. But I think either way, I do feel that at least for now, I'm staying positive. I do feel that everything will work out for the best, even if there is a delay. And I'm confident that all the people involved in this movie will get the recognition they deserve. I think the studios will make the right decision there.
Dune TV News.
So in contrast to many US-based TV shows, which have paused production due to the aforementioned strikes, it appears that the Dune TV series will be resuming its production in August. So what's the difference here? Like HBO's House of the Dragon, Dune: The Sisterhood is being produced under contract with the British union, Equity. Simply put, UK actors are not striking, and therefore production on those shows is continuing. Of course, some of the actors involved in Dune: The Sisterhood are members of the Screen Actors Guild. However, the laws in the UK would make it more complex for those individuals to boycott. Simon, in light of all these movie rumors we were just discussing, is it welcome news to you to hear that the TV project is moving forward?
Yeah, I know it exists, but I keep forgetting about the TV show because I'm so excited about part 2. I'm at least that's still going forward. My first reaction was like, oh, well, if part 2 gets delayed, then all these possible part 3 for Messiah and all the TV show and everything else would get delayed. So it's great hearing that the strike is not impacting the TV show. And I think it's interesting that there's a new showrunner, there's some new actresses involved. So it's also going to be in the back of my head, like, well, what was it like before the strike? What could have been? But I'm happy that there's still some Dune production happening out there somewhere in the unknown universe.
I have such mixed feelings, I think, at this point about the show. I think we had so much more excitement and optimism, 6-8 months ago when, the cast was coming together and we knew that they were filming, and even before that, when some things kind of changed and Villeneuve was originally going to direct an episode like the pilot and all these other things. I always give HBO the benefit of the doubt in terms of production because they always have such a high standard. So I'm still keeping an open mind and I'm crossing my fingers, but if this project was delayed indefinitely because of the strike, I honestly wouldn't even blink at that, because I'd just be like, okay, well, we'll see what happens when it happens. I'm not biting my fingernails over it. It would be different if part 2 was in the middle of filming or was getting ready to film, and then they shut this down and it was due to the strike and they wouldn't be able to proceed. I'd be like, oh my gosh, what a bummer, But I'm excited about the idea of a Dune television show, especially on HBO, because they have such a great platform and quality. But yeah, I don't know. There's so many question marks, I think, at this point. And it is, I do have mixed feelings also about the fact that they are able to like still film. Like it's such a weird, thing. I understand there's laws and regulations and things like that internationally that allow that. So that kind of is what it is. But yeah, I don't know. It's gonna be interesting. Who knows when the show will be out? If they are indeed filming soon, it'll probably run through to like the fall, as we were saying, and then maybe it'll be out about a year from now at the end of next year, early the following year. HBO has like a kind of a weird situation going on with their productions because they are widely affected by the writer's strike. The Last of Us is going to end up getting delayed, I'm sure, and House of the Dragon seems to be going forward, but maybe some other shows are going to be held back. So it's kind of a bit of a mess, and that's a whole other conversation you could have about streamers and the studios and whatnot. But mixed emotions, I would say, about this.
Yeah, and we've talked about that on the show before about how this is being positioned as a premium production, and as mentioned, Johnny, you've mentioned the HBO name and like how they usually handle things well. So keeping that in mind, like we do know, say even if we compare this to the movie, like it does seem that there has been going a lot behind the scenes in terms of production and things not going as smoothly as we'd hope, and we're going to get into that next with the changes in the cast and crew. Does the fact that there have been these changes, is that itself a red flag to you, Johnny, or can it happen?
Oh, it can happen for sure. Now, my feeling, I don't have all the information. I'm not that familiar with these actors and who was swapped in, who was swapped out, etc. As you said, we're about to talk about it in more detail, but it can always look a certain way from the outside, not knowing all the information. You could say about anything, but especially in show business. So they had this particular director, and showrunner. It seemed like it was going to be a good thing. Johan Renck, or I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, but he's very, well known for, he won an Emmy for directing Chernobyl, which is one of the best things HBO's ever made. He's done some other popular shows that are good. And so it was like, oh, this is like a great guy to have to like direct some of this and like direct the pilot and all, and kind of set the standard. And then there's creative differences and he's out the door, and now we have other people coming in. That doesn't look good, obviously, on the face. But then I had read in a report, that his vision was clashing with like the vision of like what the Villeneuve films were establishing and things like that. So that's not great. Like, well, what was the differences or what was the clashing? And like, if you're coming in to make a show set in this universe of the movies, why would you try and do something totally like different? You know what I mean? But I also appreciate a balance of, paying respect to what the movies do, but also try to do something different because it's a different era and things like that. So it's about finding the right balance. And obviously there was an imbalance here. And so they kind of blew it up, and again, fingers crossed, hopefully it's a good thing. I lean towards thinking that I would want to see the style and aesthetic of the movies more in the show. I wouldn't want something too radically different. And so if that was a point of contention and friction, then probably for the best that he left, even if maybe he would have done an overall better show or episodes that he was going to direct, but at what cost of like, I guess maybe consistency or just overall kind of world building and things like that, which I think Dune fans all really enjoy that sort of stuff, even though if it is more like the minutia rather than the characters and things like that. But there's a lot of moving parts. So again, we know a little bit, but not like enough, I feel like, to really say one way or another at this point.
Yeah, and I feel that there's a lot more that we can dive into there. But I think you raise a good point, Johnny, because like, it's great when you have like a director who comes in and he's obviously very talented. He's put together these great productions in the past, but is he the right director for Dune? Right? He could be a great director, but maybe his vision, as mentioned, was conflicting. Like maybe he was trying to do something that like didn't fit with the themes of Dune, something like that. We don't know yet, right? But that could be it. So it may be that just changing the director itself doesn't have to be a cause of concern. So I would agree with that.
Sometimes you get a director that makes a movie or a show and they're just such a wrong fit for that particular idea, even if they're a great director on their own. I'm trying to think of something off the top of my head. I know, for example, James Cameron at one point was going to make Spider-Man, like the original Spider-Man movie, before Sam Raimi. And, James Cameron, one of my favorite directors of all time, an amazing filmmaker, but the script, what I've seen and read and heard of it, and what he wanted to do, just totally wrong, just a total mismatch. And so it just is sometimes where it just doesn't line up, and maybe a different director, a different showrunner, maybe doesn't have the same profile as someone who's, like that, but you get a better meshing of material and, the person in charge. So,
and just as a refresh, remember that the TV series originally began production in November 2022 and then entered a planned hiatus. That's how it's been described. I mean, a break for the winter, it does make sense, right? But as we've just been discussing, there's been like a significant change in regard, both among the cast and the crew. So we've covered some of those earlier in the year. And now recently in the deadline reports, we have 3 key changes. So as mentioned, Johan Renck had departed. He's no longer directing the premiere, and Anna Furster is replacing him, and she'll be directing multiple episodes, it's said. So she'll obviously have an important role there. Then on the casting side, we also knew that Shirley Henderson had exited. The role of Tula Harkonnen will now be played by Olivia Williams. And finally, we have Indira Varma. She was going to play Empress Natalia, and she left. It was described due to scheduling conflicts, and she's being replaced by Jodie May.
It sounds like a mess, people, but it happens often. I mean, one of the best recasting in history was Michael J. Fox wasn't supposed to be Marty McFly. It was supposed to be Eric, I forgot who, but when you look at those dailies, you're like, there's a reason why that happened. And, I trust Warner Brothers, Legendary, HBO, whatever, you want to put title on it. And I'm sure they went out there and then just hired the most random actress. I'm sure they did screen tests. I'm sure they talked to the producers and it was like, well, who was your second choice? Let's see if we can get that person back if they're not busy. So remember, sometimes recasting is a good thing.
In the land of HBO and their big series and casting, choices, Emilia Clarke was not originally Daenerys Targaryen. They actually pilot with a completely different actor. And for whatever reason, I can't remember the specifics, but they were like, okay, this isn't working. We need to try something else. They brought in Emilia Clarke, cast her instead, and the rest is history. One of the most iconic, television characters and performances with her in that role. And so I think, you just have to wait and see. I'm a believer, and it's so cliche, but everything happens for a reason. So we'll see what the result is ultimately, whether it's good or bad. But I'm optimistic. I like to think that it's going to turn out well. Maybe it's not on the level of the movies, but maybe it's still a good time. It's a fun addition to the Dune, live action universe. Or maybe it's, spectacular, amazing, the best sci-fi show ever made, or maybe it's not very good, but we'll just, ignore it and enjoy the movies in the meantime. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a great point. At the end of the day, the final show, what we're going to see on television is really what matters, right? Like we're sort of in the thick of the news, and we're hearing all these small updates, and maybe that can be concerning, or like some things are positive, some things are negative. But at the end of the day, most people are just going to like hear there's a Dune TV series, and they're going to tune in, and they're going to judge based on what they're seeing. So let's fingers crossed that we got a great production and result.
Sometimes there's some great Doctor Who seasons, and sometimes there's some horrible Doctor Who seasons. So who knows?
Okay, that's a wrap for this week. I want to say we got some great questions and suggestions from all of you. So we're going to be diving into some really interesting topics in the upcoming episodes, and of course we're going to be keeping you up to date on all these recent news, whether it's release date, hopefully not changing, but you'll hear it all here, and what the impact will be on the movie and other aspects of Dune. So let's go ahead and sign off.
Simon Dowdy, you can follow me on Facebook, Insta, the brand new X also, or Twitter. Who knows what he's going to change it to by the time the show airs. S Dowdy. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for joining us for crazy rambling about Dune. This is one of the highlights of my weeks when I get to work on this show. So it's fun.
Johnny Sobchak here once again. Thanks so much again for tuning in, listening, and supporting the show. it's been a fun road so far. Maybe it's going to be a little more while until we get into Arrakis once again, but stay tuned, stay plugged in, and we'll keep you up to date. And you can find me on social media, of course, Johnny Sobchak, Twitter, Letterboxd, Instagram, all those good platforms. And we missed having Garen here. We missed the quartet was missing a little extra garrulous Garen today, but we'll see him next time around.
Yeah, and this was Marcus Gabriel. Thanks everybody for all the support, comments, feedback that you've been giving us. You can find me at Marcus's Writing on Twitter and Facebook, and writing on dunewsnet.com. For now, take care and see you all next time.
Oh, less than 100 days, by the way. If it comes out November 4th.
We hope you've enjoyed Dune Talk. Remember to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you know when the next episode drops. Stay tuned to DuneNewsNet.com and add us to your social feeds. Be the first to hear breaking news and reviews.